Good morning, everyone. If it's morning where you're listening, or if you happen to be listening at morning time. My name is Mike Durfour, and I'm going to be presenting today a webinar on China's National Sword Program and how it impacts on the U.S. recycling markets. This program has been designed to educate folks as part of our USDA grant work relative to town and gown. And you'll see in a little bit how important that work is facing the complexities of recycling. But before we get to that, by way of introduction, today is Earth Day. It's April 22nd, 2018, and there couldn't be a better job to do on Earth Day than to talk about recycling. This is part of our solid waste facility operator training modules that we have at NRRA. And we hope you'll take advantage not only of this one, but also of the other 10 or 12 that we've put together over the course of the last 2 or 3 years, which we think have great information for anyone that's got a particular interest in whether it's composting or PGA glass or recycling in general. So this is for community educators and environmental ambassadors, which we hope you all will be. We're presenting this training, as I said, made possible by a generous grant from the U.S. Department of Agricultural Rural Development with the goals of cross-training solid waste facility operators and school staff in rural communities of New Hampshire and Vermont. We want to take down the wall between towns and schools because we find that schools are a big community within the community and can really be a big help both with the transfer facilities and vice versa with educating the students as they hopefully will become lifelong recyclers. And it expands participation in NRA's education programs through online learning. Excuse me. Thanks to the USDA Rural Utility Service Program, training is free. The goal of the program is for the trained participants to work together on creating a safer environment, knowledgeable staff on the proper storage and handling of hazardous materials as well as recyclables, and working in conjunction on solid waste issues. After you view this webinar, please complete the webinar evaluation to help us understand your knowledge and the steps you want to take to assist your community with managing materials comprehensively and how we can help you. Once you submit the evaluation, you can download a certificate of completion for the webinar, and in New Hampshire, that will count towards your New Hampshire DES training credits. You'll receive an evaluation link to the webinar via email from info@nra.net. Once you've completed and submitted your evaluation, you'll have access to your completion certificate. If you have any technical difficulties at all with this webinar or any of the others, please send an email to info@nra.net. For those of you that may not be familiar with the Northeast Resource Recovery Association, NRRA, it was founded 37 years ago in 1981. And it was founded by 4 municipalities. We now service almost 400 municipalities throughout all of New England. And the purpose and the object for the corporation, the nonprofit corporation, was to act as a clearinghouse for relevant information, and this couldn't be any more relevant than the China sword information today, and also as a source of education in the field of solid waste management. In addition, we act as a cooperative agent with state, regional, and local government agencies, municipalities specifically, as a market development service to help you move your cleanly sorted recyclables to market. But we also help you with your MSW, municipal solid waste, and C&D needs, especially in terms of contracting. Our coverage area is all of New England, but some folks throw New York in. We do not service New York currently. We do have school club members as far afield as Indiana and Texas. And we have actually shipped loads of recyclables in the state of Florida to help out someone who found us online and said, "Can you help me with my cardboard?" And we said, "Sure, we can help you with your cardboard." So typically it's the 6 New England states: Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, mostly southern Maine, northern Massachusetts, and all of Massachusetts now, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and any NRA member town that wants to join. As I said, the school club has members that are more far-flung. We're always looking forward to perhaps seeing a school from Hawaii join so we can go out and give them their certificate in person. But for the most part, it's concentrated in New Hampshire. All New Hampshire schools are members automatically of the school club. by virtue of the excellent support of New Hampshire the Beautiful, which covers their membership. We do ask that the membership information be updated routinely, but other than that, you're welcome to participate and get your password to get into the school club website and take advantage of all the excellent programs that are currently running in the NRRA School Club. Some of those include classroom workshops, Healthy Home, Clean Waters, Waste Equals Global Climate Change, Back to the Earth, and Garbage Gorillas. We just did one of the Garbage Gorilla sequences for 5 third grades over in Hempstead just this last week. School of Technical Assistance in the form of green cleaning and indoor air quality evaluation and review. Trash on the Lawn Days, where we actually separate out an entire day's worth of trash or waste. Have the students do the separation, and they can see exactly what's in that and what actually is waste and what can be recycled. And we also do star assessments at the different schools as well, which gives you a baseline of where to start towards building a sustainable recycling program, which is the goal. As far as information dissemination, we have what we call a monthly MOM meeting, Members, Operations, and Marketing, monthly meetings. In addition, we conduct workshops. We just completed Talking Trash 5.0 just 2 weeks ago. And we do facility tours several times a year that can be used for continuing ed credits towards transfer facility operator certifications and renewals. But most importantly, it's the sharing of information by the operators themselves. It'll come up with a unique question. How do I deal with this? What's the proper way to recycle that? So they can keep their residents informed. A big part of what we do is our annual conference, which is coming up this Monday and Tuesday, May 21st and 22nd. It is packed with workshops all day long, as well as a fantastic exhibit hall, which has cutting-edge technologies being brought to you so you can evaluate what the next step is you may want to take with your recycling program. That's a 2-day event. May 21st and 22nd for operations folks, for town administrators, for municipal employees of other ilk, as well as state employees that want to get caught up on what's up to date in the recycling world. In addition, on the second day, on Tuesday, we're joined by almost 200 students who come through and take advantage of both the exhibit hall and also their workshops and do a mini toll right on site. And the fun part of that second day, just like it is the first day when we give out awards, is the smiles on the faces of the kids that have worked so hard on their programs throughout the year. I encourage you to attend if you've never been to one, or you don't have a municipal position, but you just want to learn about recycling. You won't find a better resource anywhere in New England. Our operator training modules include professional development credits where applicable. They're in our operator smackdown, safety and public relations training for waste facility operators. The waste industry and recycling industry is the 5th most dangerous industry in the country, as determined by the Department of Labor, U.S. Department of Labor. It's a very dangerous occupation. It requires a great deal of information and knowledge and skill, and most importantly, safety procedures need to be followed, both for the protection of the operators, but also for the general public. Following up on that, things that go boom, meth labs and dangerous wastes are showing up more and more in transfer stations along with sharps. Need to know how to deal with those, need how to keep people safe. We have an excellent webinar this just recently updated on processed glass aggregate, a certified waste-derived product where you can actually use glass, or reuse glass. It's one of the stronger programs in the country, and it's getting more and more attention as the other outlets for glass reuse have closed. We touch on Vermont's Act 148, materials management practices. What do we need to know? That's a new program driven by the statute in Vermont, which is banning all recyclables and organics from their landfill. The Dirt on Dirt, Municipal Composting 101. This is a great exercise to follow through. We're in New Hampshire actually coming into sponsoring more and more pilot programs for composting. So we expect that the composting world is going to expand in New Hampshire quite a bit. We have one on It's Not Easy Being Green, Current Market Trends in Recycling. That one we're going to replace with the one you're listening to now, which is the China Sword, in terms of an update, because it's more time sensitive to the information we've got. So let's talk about the China sword. If you haven't heard of that, I'm going to go back a little bit and let you know that this wasn't something that just came in this year. This just started back in 2013. And back in 2013, they didn't call it China sword. They called it green fence. And I want to give credit to Dylan Thomas of the Recycling Partnership for some of the slides here, as well as the Swanner folks, our partners that we work with to share information, as well as ISRI. You'll see those on some of the slides. This was first addressed, and the impact became very clear when it was first addressed on October 19th of 17 with a online conference call, a live webinar, if you will, where over 500 people participated. That tells you the interest that has been focused on this particular issue, and you're going to see why that interest is so appropriate as we move forward. So as I said, in 2013, China instituted their new program called the Green Fence. And this is a picture taken from Long Beach, California. Those crates, those shipping containers are all headed back to China's mainland. Typically, they would go back empty. But when China started exploding in its economy a few years ago, they started filling those containers that are going back anyway with recyclable materials so that they could offer better pricing than we could actually domestically. It would cost us more to move the material from one side of Los Angeles to Long Beach than it would for the boat to go from Long Beach over to China. So they were able to factor that into their pricing, offering phenomenal pricing for export if you could meet their requirements for shipping, not for contamination at that time, but for shipping. So it made it a very attractive deal, and in fact was instrumental in a number of our fiber mills having to close because they couldn't compete with this. But the green fence portion of this ban said that when that ship arrived in China, it would hit the green fence. This is the Great Wall, obviously, Dylan Thomas's attempt to show the green fence. But this is what it would end up being. The enforcement arm of green fence was called Earth Goddess. And they would open the containers that you saw on the ship. They would inspect the containers, and if they found contamination in it, they would close them up and ship them back. Typically, the shipping is done in lots of 20 containers. If they found one container in the lot that was contaminated, they wouldn't bother checking the rest. They would ship the entire lot of 20 back at a cost of $10,000 per container, or $200,000. So that put an immediate economic red flag up on the flagpole, and everybody said, wait a minute, we've got to be very careful we don't ship anything over they're going to reject. So from 2013 through 15 and even into 16, a great deal of time and effort was spent trying to clean up any contamination that was found primarily in the single stream producing plants that were the majority of the export users in the first place, as they realized they had to meet this criteria or economically they would be in trouble. So then we come forward and we look more recently in 2016-17. The green fence was prompted by some adverse information that was put in the press and was an embarrassment to the country, but it also showed that they shouldn't be taking that material. In this case, this is I think it's on YouTube. It's called Plastic China, and I want to give you not a trailer alert or anything like that, but I want to give you a warning that it is an extremely graphic depiction of a family, a very poor family in China, and how they live on the top of this plastic heap with their 6-year-old kids going through and picking plastics apart. It's strictly uncorroborated, but my understanding from secondhand information is that China's president saw this and was so struck by the depressing conditions that what this one family at least represented, and the fact that that could be replicated across a great number of folks in China, that convinced him that if for no other reason than the benefit of their population, this was not going to continue. And they went and looked at why was this China such a big importer of plastic, they had been using this system to generate other material, but they found they were throwing way more away, and it was creating an infrastructure that was deplorable. So there was a number of headlines in the press. China's tightening the screw and we have to respond. U.S. companies concerned at China's proposed ban. The largest waste firms say their recycling loads are certified and clean. China's war on foreign garbage. Imported recycling is a boom for China, so why ban it? They were making money on it. What comes next after China's scrap ban surprise? It was no surprise. This has been in the works for a good 4 years. So where did it actually generate? As I said, the President Xi Jinping's speech, after he had seen that plastic video, he had 89 mentions of the environment and just 70 of the economy. 5 years ago, that would have been the reverse in much stronger contrast. So he announced this in April when he looked to strengthen his hand at upcoming Communist Party Congress. There were anti-pollution, anti-corruption measures that were connected and high-profile enforcement, and they televised the raids to enforce the national sword. As most of you know, he's now been elected president for life. This is a personal issue with him that he has staked his reputation on, and I would expect that that's going to carry a lot of weight in the future of this program. Another reason why it was so important to do this, aside from the impact and the personal impact on the peoples, you're looking at a situation in China right now where 60% of the groundwater is unfit for human consumption. Almost 20% of the arable land contaminated with heavy metals, and only 84 out of 340 or so level cities can attain the national standard for air quality, so you don't have to go outside, wear a mask when you go outside. And it's a result of many factors, including decades of putting economic growth above the environment. And you just saw on the previous slide, that's now changing. It's now the environment above economic growth, because I think they realize that economic growth unchecked for longer periods of time is going to have just a totally devastating effect on their entire environment and their people. And you can look below here and you see 100 million new cars were on the road in the last decade alone. That's a huge implosion of vehicles up on and that's going to have a huge impact, obviously, on the air quality. But if you look back to the middle here, one of the concerns that's not monetary is rising social pressures. Pollution-related social incidents are the leading cause of social instability or unrest. This is a huge country with a huge population, and it doesn't take long for things to really take hold. And if you don't respond to that, you're probably not going to be able to maintain your government. So I think there's a real push here to address this problem, given the status of their current environmental policies. There were inspections of plastic recycling facilities, 900 facilities being inspected. Almost 600 of those had violations. Almost 50 or so were already closed, and another 380 suspended operations as a result of their inspections. So they were doing inspections on not just our material coming in, but what was being done with the material once it got there. And when I say our material, I mean this was the global impact of recycling. Not just the United States recycling material, but the EU, other countries in Southeast Asia. China became a magnet for a good portion of the entire global recycling commodity market. Import licenses weren't being renewed as a result. Customs enforcement imports known for scrap were stepped up, and many more loads were being rejected. And as we said, the rejection of loads is something you just economically cannot abide. So last July on the 18th, they gave the World Trade Organization notice, the 4 classes and 24 kinds of scrap, all plastics, unsorted mixed paper, textiles, some glass and metals, and they seized 85,000 tons in a sword raid, and again, they published that. So they've told their people back in April, they've told the folks shipping to it, clean up the contamination. They notified the World Trade Organization. All this took place over the course of the last 2 years. And inside of China, countrywide inspections and enforcement actions. Previously, I showed you they'd done 900. That was in October. As recently as this March, they've now found 65% of 1,700 enterprises non-compliant. So permits are being revoked, not issued, or with smaller quotas if they are issued. Smaller or lost orders are being seen more and more. Enterprises are closing. They're losing customers over there in China. And so they've instituted Blue Sky. This is the same thing as the Earth Goddess. It's the enforcement arm. And they're going to focus on combating smuggling, foreign garbage, and they're going to make sure that there are no more incursions where there are no customs officials currently. Why does all this matter in China? Why has this impact been so big? Approximately 30% of all recyclables collected are exported outside the United States. Hong Kong and China account for almost 70% of that 30% volume, other than in plastics, other than for number one, peat. So they're the big market. And you can see worldwide here from ISRI, mainland China's share of global imports for selected recycled commodities in 2016, there were 3 categories where they were more than half. Copper scrap, this is of the world's exported recycling, recovered paper and fiber, and plastic scrap over here. So you can see whenever you have a reduction in these 2 numbers, it's going to put a real burden on the rest of the world numbers to accommodate or to be able to pick it up. In terms of the numbers here at home, 155,000 direct employment jobs, plus another 378,000 jobs throughout the economy, indirectly supported by recycling, so almost 500,000 jobs, 130 million tons processed annually. And you can see the percentages here in terms of the tons that are processed. These two show you where our material has been going. On the left side, we have plastics. China is 67% of the exports. So China and Hong Kong were picking up the majority of the exports for plastics. In recovered fiber, China is by far our most important market. If you look over here, these are the top 15 destinations. China's number one with about 14 million tons, but that was in 2016. So that's taken a direct hit now for mixed paper, and the new numbers in 18 are going to be way less than that. India was the second place we exported to, and that was 1,728,000. So China is the huge part of the market here. And when I talk about fibers taking a hit in terms of the other countries, here's 2017. This is for EU's exports, scrap exports to China. Paper was halved between January and November. So they had a history of exporting about 874 kilotons to China, and they were down to 432 by the time that year was over. So that is a huge 50% drop year over year, or January through November. And that's going to continue to drop as they continue to close down operations in China. So that all deals with how the physical transfer of materials slowed down to a screeching halt. Material either couldn't be shipped over there, or it had to go somewhere else, or no matter what you did with it, it was going to be an increased cost. So the cost started to really affect domestically what was happening here in the United States. And as far back as 2015, October, this John Tierney fellow was saying, this is before the blue sky and the national sword hit. This was halfway between Green Fence and National Sword. Because of that initial impact, he was just decrying the fact that recycling wasn't going to survive. It's a broken model. And everybody's saying, oh, it's single stream's fault. The increasing contamination in single stream is what we're shipping over there, and that's what's causing the other material to be banned. According to waste management figures, contamination of loads was an average of 16%. That was back in 15. It's now gone as high as 50% in incoming loads, so the average is probably more up around the 20 to 25% range. And then you have glass, and then you have mixed paper, all of which cost money. All of this drives up cost to customers. That's the important part of this 2015 piece. This drives up cost to customers. Processing costs continue to increase as market demand reduced contamination. So before National Sword hit, there was a movement on the part of China for at least 2 to 3 years to try and correct it. And when that did not happen, they basically shut the door. It's all glass's fault. People are currently paying attention now more and more to this as people are taking glass out of their single stream recycling, because what happens, glass is heavy. You pay by the ton. If the price of the ton goes up, you want to take the heavy stuff out, especially when it can be reused, which it can, and you will see if you go to the NRRA PGA workshop. So this is a contrast between the number of single stream plants that took off from 2012 to 16, and the ones that were built in 12 to 16 were built based on the income figures or the profitability numbers for that facility in 2011. And what happened was 2011 was the peak of the revenues. So everything looked really good and you could make the model work economically. By the time you got the facility built in 16, you're on a downward curve. And by the time you got to 18, you probably shouldn't have built it in the first place, just from a strictly economics point of view. Here's the value of what these sites were producing more and more of, because more and more of the sites were being built. As they were producing more material, the value of the material went from 180 a ton on average, and this was down in the 75 range, and now it's down in the 33 to 0 range. So you had your facilities going up, 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 and the value of what they were producing went down, 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 down. It couldn't have been any more drastic. The world's largest plastic scrap exporter is the United States. You can see over here, and this is 15 numbers, 2 million tons we export every year. Japan was next, and that's out of a grand total of almost 12 million tons. So we are the biggest exporter of plastic. We have the most plastic floating around, thanks to Dustin Hoffman and The Graduate. It's plastic, young man. Well, that's taken off. So we're producing more and more of it. We're shipping more and more of it outside the country because we don't have capacity here. And it's definitely increasing the problem. You can see that once the Blue Sky and National Sword kicked in, then you have a drop in what China would take. These are the monthly U.S. scrap exports to mainland China during 2017. Remember, we looked at fiber from the EU and it dropped in half. This is even more dramatic in terms of the plastic, and that goes back to that plastic video that I mentioned. We were at about 75,000 tons in January exported to China. January of 2017, 75,000 tons of plastic scrap. By the time we get to December and the National Sword has taken effect, we're down to 6,000 tons. 75,000 to 6,000. The real question is, where did all the rest of it go? And where is it going to go now? So what happens next? This is a picture of our good friend, Mr. Ben Harvey, whose family has been in the recycling business for over 110 years, and they recycle everything at E.L. Harvey, and they do it with a passion for trying to save the environment and do it right. But it really is a problem when you can't move the material. And this is mixed paper, which the Chinese absolutely banned in their July 18th World Trade Organization notification. So Ben's hoping at some point he'll be able to find a market for this material and he can move it so he can keep recycling it, and it doesn't have to go into a landfill or burn plant. Market growth opportunities looking forward in Southeast Asia. So if China won't take it, well, Vietnam may take it, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, India, Mexico, Canada. If they all took it and you added it all up, it wouldn't even come close to what China had been taking. Not even close. So, and the other part that we're already seeing as we're getting more and more reaction from those countries, they're starting to say, we'll take it, but it's got to meet the specifications that China has set on theirs, because we don't want that either. They're dealing with their own issues The Philippines, for example, as an island that's visited by over 2 million wedding visitors every year, and they're having to close the island for 6 months so they can clean it up. That's a huge economic loss for them. So they don't want any more plastic over there right now. They're trying to deal with the amounts that they have. And it's hopeful that people are starting to pay attention to the fact that we have way too much plastic that we're not handling responsibly, and there's way too much of it ending up in the ocean and the food stream. You can see that there are large regional differences to this impact. Some folks are buying 3 through 7 bales, not many. Some are having trouble moving material. This would normally be cleared out on any given day. Some are paying to move material. And as I mentioned earlier, for the single stream folks, where they were getting paid $180 a ton, at this point they might be lucky if they can move it at no cost. That's a huge drop in revenue. That's going to put a real incentive in the folks that run single stream plants to say, okay, we've got to do something differently. We've got to do it quicker. Let's take the glass out. Let's clean up as best we can, and let's find new markets for our material domestically if we can do that. There is some talk of landfilling. There are waivers being issued in Oregon and Washington State, as well as Massachusetts, for folks if they can't find a recycling market to take the recyclables. It's giving them a waiver from existing regulations and law to be able to landfill it until this crisis passes, assuming the crisis is going to pass. The history folks indicate there's going to be more environmental compliance inspections on Chinese enterprises so that they make sure there's no backdoor violation of these new rules. There'll be a low number of approved imports, and there'll be a potential ban on additional paper, plastics, and non-ferrous metals. Once they figure out that they can survive without our material, then they're going to make sure that they don't take any more than they absolutely need. So we see that there's a tremendous amount of interest and challenge in dealing with recyclables, especially if you get down to a point where, okay, we don't have a market for these recyclables. Even though they can be recyclable, we've got no one that'll buy them. We've got to throw them in the landfill. So what's the problem? We throw other stuff in landfill. We used to throw stuff in landfill before we started Earth Day in 1970. Had more attention paid to what we were doing with that and trying to make sure we didn't just throw away valuable resources. One of the problems with it is New England is facing a real capacity problem at its landfills to the tune of about 2 million tons that it's going to be short by 2025. So in 7 years, New England's going to be producing 2 million tons of trash more than it has a place to put them. For New England, including New York, I think the number is closer to 5 million. This is just Massachusetts. The Connecticut would fall into line and add some to it. Right now, a good portion of Massachusetts trash is going to landfills in New Hampshire, but they're not going to be able to sustain this type of volume for long periods of time. So between where we are right now, it's 18-19, we're seeing a drop in capacity because there are some landfills that are closing. That drop is going to really kick in and make a difference out here in 2025. So we need to look at this and determine, okay, if we know we're going to run out of room, we better figure out what we're going to do with it besides just raise the price of what we put in there. Recyclables going to a landfill being charged current landfill pricing of $75 a ton perhaps versus recyclables going to a recycling center at $100 a ton sounds like that's what we should do with it. But once you do that and you're looking at regular trash not having a home, the price of that ton going to a landfill is going to go way above $100 a ton. It's been predicted for years. It didn't happen. We're now looking at it pretty squarely that the numbers don't lie. And as you can see here, the price in the Northeast for landfills over time, and again, this is, I believe, 16. Yeah, 16. It's just bumping up against $80 for non-contracted material. What I'm hearing in the marketplace is not only is 80 going to be the new normal, the contracts aren't going to be as long, because we don't know what's going to happen when that 2025 capacity issue is upon us. If we could plan and do something now, that would be the wise thing to do, probably, and figure out what to do with this material. Not make it in the first place, reduce it, reuse it, recycle it. All of that will reduce the volume that has to go into those landfills. But in the Chinese language, when written, the word crisis is composed of two characters. One represents danger and the other opportunity. And John Kennedy was one of the many folks that have used this same quote. You've seen now through the course of this webinar what the crisis is and what the danger is. The danger is we do nothing. If we continue down the path we're on, then what we're going to be facing is ever-increasing costs for recyclables, ever-increasing costs for trash, fewer and fewer places that it can be taken, further distance it will have to be hauled, driving up the price even more. And sooner or later, it's going to have a major impact on municipal budgets. The majority of the tonnage in the waste stream currently, with a 35% recycling rate, the remaining 65% is going in at the trash number. If that trash number jumps from 75 to 150, for example, or doubles, a lot of communities are going to have to really look at what they're doing with their trash. Whether it's composting, whether it's recycling more and better, recycling right, all of those will help reduce that impact, but really have to get down to throwing away only the absolute minimum that you have to throw away. And it was basically echoed by the Recycling Partnership, by SWANA, by ISRI. The number one piece of advice they could do for right now is clean up your recycling stream. Make a clean product that will encourage domestic markets capacity to grow. That will encourage us not to have to ship it to China in the first place. And that will give us a better chance to recycle right. Talk to your vendor, talk to whether it's a MRF or a hauler, see what's happening to affect their pricing. Don't get taken by surprise and all of a sudden they come in and say, oh, tomorrow we've got to double your price. You don't want to see that scenario play out. Don't change your programs without thinking through long-term investment. Don't freak out your residents, but keep them informed. Let them know that you are doing your homework and you're trying to come up with the best solution, as we all are. For those that process material at municipal recycling facilities, it's all about quality. Clean up your bales. Just like the Recycling Partnership folks said, clean up your recycling stream, clean up your bales, communicate with customers, slow down the sort line so you got those workers have a chance to get everything off. Hire more workers. So if you've got an 8-station setup and you've only got 4 folks in there, you're not doing yourself any favors and it's going to get rejected. Add new technology. Optical sorters and robotics have made improvements, but they can't cover everything. It's time to change, according to SWANA, and we concur. We change our thinking. China's not going back to pre-green fence days, certainly. They're not going to go back to pre-national sword days even more, because that's been an internationally published ban that they put there with the World Trade Organization. Other Asian markets may be a temporary band-aid, but they don't have the capacity. They're not going to have the capacity, and they're not going to want to take the material any more than China does. We need to change our messaging. We've thought for a long time recycling was free because it was paid for by the revenues that came in. But in fact, those revenues are no longer there. They're now costs. Contamination costs cities and process thousands and thousands of dollars. Recycling creates U.S. jobs. I've heard from more than one select board, well, if we stop our recycling program altogether, we can cut back on the 1.5 people we have at the transfer station. No, you need the 1.5 people at the transfer station to properly handle the entire waste stream that's coming in there, including regular trash, construction and demo, tires, freon removal, scrap metal, you name it. Everything that comes into that place besides the recycling is probably being handled on a bare bones personnel budget. And it's been offset to some degree by some revenues for those folks that source separate. So I know that a number of folks are looking at this Zero Waste Boston initiative. If there's a way to get to zero waste with the economics that are looming in terms of the business as usual plan we've been following for these many years, since the first Earth Day, So that would be a goal. If we can figure out how to do that and save on trucking costs and hauling costs as well as disposal fees, that'll be a huge plus. So Swana said that we've got to change. Recycling Partnership says clean up your stream. And the ISRI folks echoed that and said, everyone has a role to play. Quality, quality, quality is the only way to keep and bring this market back, hopefully domestically, not an export. But this tagline at the bottom is most important. And it says, most importantly, all of us, industry, trade associations, governments, brand owners, industrial consumers, as well as residents and others, need to work together to identify solutions to the ever-changing stream of consumer products entering recycling, while also assuring we meet the needs of the industrial consumer at the end of the chain to ensure a quality commodity product. If we can do this, then the recycling markets are going to rebound. Hopefully they'll rebound here in the United States domestically, which eliminates all the shipping that takes place into the international market. And that's our best hope, to take the opportunity that's presented to us by the danger of this crisis. This was from the presentation was done back in 2015, and it was market predictions at the time. Future markets are more likely than not to be volatile for some time. Beyond that, major unforeseen events could occur, totally undermining the stability of the recycling industry. Every once in a while, you can guess right. Unfortunately, we did guess right. We just didn't know in what form it was going to come. But the national sword from China has definitely filled the bill for a major unforeseen event. And it's totally undermining the entire recycling industry. If you have any questions at all about this webinar or any other part of your town's recycling program or your school's recycling program, or how you get your school to talk to the town or the town to talk to the school, if you need help with your waste contracts or your C&D contracts or any of that, just get a hold of NRRA. Our theme this year is recycling rules, and we believe it does rule. It's higher up in the order of how we'd like to do things. After we get through reduce and reuse, recycling is number 3 on the line, and we need to do a better job of it. We will keep you apprised on the current status of recycling markets, and we will try and give you our best guess and a best roadmap for dealing with it going forward. But in the meantime, we think your best defense against China's national sword is the NRRA. And the folks that work there are dedicated each and every day to try and make that come to fruition. So we thank the folks at Resource Recycling and all the other contributors to the slides that we had, especially Swana and ISRI, as well as the Recycling Partnership. We thank you all for recycling, and we remind you to fill out your evaluations, and that way you can get credit for the webinar. Again, if you have any other questions, by all means, please call. And you can ask for me, Mike Durford, the Executive Director. I don't know if I introduced myself at the beginning. If I didn't, that'll be a question on the evaluation. In any event, thank you all. And please go ahead and celebrate Earth Day 2018 and keep the plastics out of the ocean. Thank you all for listening.